right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Heather Lindale. I work at the Ottawa Catholic School Board. I'm the math and business consultant. Today, we have Dr. Jerry Maniat and Sada, and I'm sorry, Sada, I've forgotten your name already. Sada Hussein?
That's exactly it, yeah.
Oh, very good, okay. So Dr. Jerry Maniat is an educator at the University of Ottawa, the Faculty of Medicine, and a researcher at the Briere Health Research Institute in Ottawa, and the executive director of the Equity and Health Systems Lab. He is passionate about working with students and looks for ways to support them on their journey. Today, Dr. Maniat, with his sidekick, Sada, will be providing an overview of the unique opportunities that exist in the health system and provide insight into the keys to unlocking those opportunities. And Sada, could you please introduce yourself very quickly?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Sada Hussein. I'm a second-year internal medicine resident here at the University of Ottawa. I also did my undergrad and my medical school in Ottawa. And I enjoy, doing research in terms of social determinants of health, maternal health, and equity, diversity, and inclusion, especially in medicine.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Heather, for the introduction. I'm glad that Sada also got a chance to introduce herself to all of you. It's great to see that there are so many that are joining us as participants, and a few more are joining us. Well, and we look forward to the conversation we have with you this afternoon. And I hope that you've been having a very helpful experience being part of Launch 2024. This is I think the third or fourth year that I've done this, and I've been very fortunate to have these conversations. And I'm looking forward to hearing what your thoughts are and what questions you may have. But we wanted to pose this kind of question, like, how do you make an impact with your life? And I think there are many ways to think about it. But as we dive in this afternoon, in the brief period of time that we have, we want to see, is there a way of making that journey happen within the health system? If you want to contact me, if you have any other questions, perhaps it's after the session, here are a couple of ways that you can do so. My email address is jmaniat@toh.ca, and it's on the bottom corner. And if you want to learn more about the Equity and Health Systems Lab, the QR code, you can scan that and it'll take you to the main page. This afternoon, we're going to explore the diverse opportunities that exist within the health system to leverage these personal experiences and expertise, because we want to think about how do we make a positive impact on patient care and experience. That's a lot to try and cover in a very short period of time, but we want to perhaps give you a flavor of this, a taste of what could be. So what is the health system? I think most people, when they think about the health system, they definitely think about the hospital, right? The place that you go to when you need help. Usually it's an emergency. Perhaps it's an injury due to sports, or you've been in a motor vehicle accident, or perhaps it's a loved one who's had a stroke or a heart attack. These are the typical things that we often think about, and these are often usually the very big buildings that are in our communities. But we also have clinics. We have places that are often family medicine, physician clinics or family health teams, but there are also specialists that have clinics in the community. And most of the time, they're managing things that are more chronic and for a longer duration of time. For example, diabetes management would be managed in a clinic where you watch the sugars, you adjust the medications, you see if there's any complications or side effects. And in that kind of space, the goal is to try and keep people out of the hospital, actually, in this kind of space. Thirdly, we have our long-term care sector. And in Canada, in Ontario, we think of these places, for example, like nursing homes. These are places where there's 24/7 care capability with doctors and nurses that are in these spaces to provide support for individuals who require essentially full kind of care. And there's different variations in terms of what that might look like and different type of settings. But as a whole, these would be places where people literally live for a long period of time. And finally, there's the public health. And I think during the COVID pandemic, it became really evident that that public health was really important. How do we prevent problems from happening, such as infections? But public health does a lot more than that. They do things like making sure that the food that we eat at the restaurants is safe. They make sure that the water that we drink is clean and safe as well. And there's so many other areas that they're involved with. But it gives you a flavor that the health system is not a single space, but rather a compilation of all these areas working together to make people healthier. And so what does being in the healthcare system be like? For individuals, we get the opportunity to impact the lives of individuals. I also see that we can make a difference in the community that we serve, that we live in, that we are doing our activities within. Being in healthcare is also a space where you actually have to keep learning. And we'll talk to Sada in a little bit. She's someone who's at an earlier part of her learning trajectory to being a physician who's going to go out into practice. But as someone who's been doing this for a while, I'm still learning. And I think that's the neat part about being in healthcare. You don't stop. I actually kind of say that if you're going to stop, that's probably when you're going to want to retire and sort of find something else, whether it's gardening or some other type of hobby. I think it's also a really neat opportunity because you get to be involved to shaping the future. And there's a lot of things happening in healthcare, a lot of technology, a lot of AI, a lot of new management of diseases that we never thought about before. There's an opportunity to be part of those conversations and be part of the change that happens in these spaces. And I think finally, the really interesting thing that I've enjoyed about working in the healthcare space, in the health system, it's not a solitary sport. It's actually one in which you get to work and journey with others together in this space because you're all looking to trying to make a difference in the community. We're trying to make an impact in the lives of individuals, and we want to do it together because we can actually do it better together and we can go further together in this space. So what's it going to take? I think it requires these three big elements. One is humility. Why do I say that? Well, I think the more that I do this, the more I realize that the body and the health system is so complicated. And it makes me realize that I need to draw in other people to be part of the conversation. Curiosity. I think I need to ask really good questions. And sometimes that's my job, is to ask the questions. I wonder why this is the way it is. I wonder why this person did get sick. I wonder why they still get sick. They keep coming back repeatedly. I wonder why that is. Because it's in those questions that we can understand what is actually underpinning what's making people either healthy or not so healthy. Thirdly, compassion. I think this is really where the heart comes out of, right? And this is where we get to journey alongside individuals. Many who, when they come into a hospital kind of setting where I typically work, this is not the best time in their life, right? They're coming because they feel lousy, they haven't been well, maybe this has been going on for a long time, maybe it's only a short time, but it's really serious. And we need to be there with compassion to demonstrate to them that we're here for them. We're here to journey with them to see how far we can take things and get them better. So I think as we do this, we realize that there are many different pathways to making an impact. And I think all of this really, matters on, yes, your courses and your grades, but I think the biggest thing, and most people don't realize, is your character. And what do I mean by that? This is a model that was designed by the Western University Ivy School of Business. And they did this as part of a work that they were looking at how leaders are in the business field. But if I look at this circle or this diagram with all its little circles on it, I think I would love to have a nurse, a doctor, a pharmacist, a clerk, anyone who's in the health system having any of these things, because character tells me who they are and how they will interact with me in the moment when I'm struggling. And I think as much as we put towards grades and courses, because that's all the stuff your competence, as it were, it's really character is what happens and how you put it out there and how you engage with other people. So do you see yourself in healthcare? And I think many people, when they come to these type of talks, they're like, well, maybe I want to see myself as a physician or a nurse or a physiotherapist or a pharmacist. But I think the reality is that the health system and the system itself requires so many people. For example, at the Ottawa hospital where I work, we have over 5,000 learners, people like Sada, who come from different programs across the spectrum that you see on the screen in front of you. But then we also have about 18,000 staff and physicians who also are from all these areas. If you think about it, that's a little small city of people working within a hospital system to provide care for the entire region, not just the city of Ottawa, but the region of Eastern Ontario and Nunavut, because that's who comes to us when they need help. And as you can see on this diagram, there are so many different ways that a person could actually see themselves in a healthcare, right? If you don't like the sight of blood, you don't have to pursue a career in the clinical spaces. Maybe finance is your thing. Maybe it's IT and IS kind of stuff. Maybe you love to think about logistics, moving things around, keeping supply chains going. There are so many different ways that a person could find meaningful, impactful work within the health system. And so at this point, I want to take a little bit of a shift here. I want to introduce Sada Hussain, who she introduced herself a little bit earlier. But Sada, maybe you can give us a little bit more of a flavor of, the journey that you took to getting here, and maybe a little bit of your background of, your understanding of what it was like to be a high school student, like our participants are here.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, my name is Sada Hussain. I am a second year internal medicine resident here at the University of Ottawa. And so for myself, I grew up in Ottawa, preschool to residency and everything in between happened here. I remember high school quite vividly, actually. I went to Gisèle Lalonde, so one of the French high schools here in Eastern Ontario. And I think at that time, I really enjoyed all of my science classes, whether it be physics, biology, chemistry, but I was particularly drawn to chemistry. And so I had thought I would be doing more of an engineering program in university. I'd actually applied to chemical engineering, biomedical mechanical engineering, and biochem is my third program. I don't know when or why the shift happened, but I ended up choosing biochem. And initially, I really thought I was going to go more towards the university professor route. I loved organic chemistry. My favorite thing actually was booking a study room at the library at U Ottawa, having all my friends in the room and kind of breaking down the different organic chemistry reactions. And, my friends really appreciated it too. It was some time for us to hang out together, but also do our studying, which was very effective. So I did end up joining a synthetic chemistry lab in my second year of undergrad, kind of working towards pursuing my interests. And I think it was in that environment that I realized maybe professorship isn't for me. And I think that's why it's really important to take a step back and do some introspection, figure out the kind of personality you have, what you're looking for in a career. And me remembering being a high school student, you barely really know yourself and you don't even really know what these different careers have to offer
Mm.
or what you would mesh well with, which is why I think, the whole idea of mentorship or reaching out to people who are in careers that you're interested in is what helps a lot. I was fortunate enough that my supervisor in my lab was someone that, I could approach and ask questions because that's who I saw myself as in the future. And, after a few discussions, he kind of pointed out some specific qualities and characteristics that I have. One, I'm a very extroverted person. I love chatting with people. I love getting to know people. And that doesn't happen very much in a synthetic chemistry lab, especially with everyone having their headphones in, kind of doing their reactions. So we kind of took a look at the different careers that exist
Mhm.
and align them with my interests. And, all the sciences being part of my interest, and myself, really liking to talk with people, get to know people. And I was also someone who was very curious and I loved the idea of solving things day to day. So I was working in MRI imaging, so bioimaging in general, and just finding the best way to image with the different chemical reactions. And so we took that interest and it translated really well to medicine, actually. And I really never saw myself as a physician or a doctor in high school or even in undergrad. So it was actually third year of undergrad that, I started looking into it and I applied to medical school. It did work out. And even now, like I'm thinking of myself as a second year resident, I wouldn't be where I am today without my mentors and learning more about myself and the different careers that are available. So I think those are three really important things that you need to take into consideration every step of the way. And it's really never, too early to be thinking about that. Learn more about yourself and, what's out there.
Those are great points, Sada, and I especially love the how you yourself went through that reflective journey. Like you
Yeah,
had to pause, say, "Hey, what am I actually really interested in?" But you had
exactly.
some you had a key mentor that's guided you with some good questions to make you think about other possibilities.
Exactly.
So I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I'm going to throw the questions up on the screen so that the audience can see it as well. So how are high school and university different, and what kind of changes did you really need to make that successful transition into those studies? Because oftentimes this is one of those things that people will say, like, how different is it? Like, I really like high school. Like, it feels comfortable. Is that, is it a very different kind of space?
That's a really good question. And I think so when it comes to high school, you're in class Monday through Friday, 8 to 4, with a lunch break, and sometimes you'll have a spare in grade 12, for example. So everything is very structured. Where you're at, the different tests and exams, what you should be doing almost every hour of the day between Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. It's kind of spelled out for you. It's also hard to forget things like exams or quizzes. They're on the whiteboard. Every time you walk in, it's written up there. If not, your teacher's reminding you, there's the exam coming up in a couple of days. So I feel like there's a lot of guidance and
Hmm.
structure that exists in high school. All of that goes out the window when you start university. All of a sudden, you're very independent in the sense that you get a syllabus at the beginning of class. The syllabus has the schedule for when the exams are going to be. Professors, they will mention it as the classes go on, but nobody's looking out for your attendance.
Hmm.
Nobody's really looking out to constantly remind you that there's going to be an exam coming. And surprisingly enough, the amount of hours spent in class decreased significantly. So you go from almost 40 hours to about 15 to 20. So that's about half. A little misleading because the amount that you're not in class is what you're studying and working on outside of class. So it's really important to keep in mind the idea of time management, organization, and trying to be as proactive as you can. You'll realize you have 5 different university courses and you might have 4 midterms within the same 3 days. And
Hmm.
that's a lot of material to cover. As soon as you get your syllabus, writing out your exams, your midterms, your assignments in a little planner, organizing your time based on that, because there will be a lot of material to go over. And things are taken up a notch as well. When it comes to assignments, for example, the little blurb of what's needed to be done is given to you, but there's much less guidance in terms of going up to the teacher's desk, during class and asking, so I'm thinking of this, how does this overall look? There's a lot of that support in high school,
Hmm.
but I also do think, you are well prepared going into university. The average high school in Ottawa, so I'm thinking of my own, as a public high school, Giselle Lalonde, I felt very prepared going into university. You'll have different assignments. They'll teach you how to do a bibliography, how to search credible sources, lab reports even. Um, but that also doesn't mean that there isn't support in university. So,
Right.
professors will have their office hours, which
Hmm.
I used to attend religiously, in the sense that it's very helpful, especially if you're not able to get that one-on-one with the professor during class. Entry-level courses have about 300 students, which is, 10 times as much as you would expect from high school. But it's very helpful to go to those office hours, to attend your discussion groups, which are smaller groups with now the teacher's assistants, the TAs, who also serve as a great resource in terms of assignment clarification, any questions that you otherwise would have just gone to your teacher's desk in high school. So things seem bigger, that you're more independent, and in reality, they do seem harder, but there are the supports and avenues that you can take so that you are able to, get through your first year, which is the toughest, and then second, third, and fourth come along. There's also study groups. So I remember for calc, as well as one of our science courses, Monday evenings, somewhere at University of Ottawa, there was TAs that would volunteer, and you can do your assignments, and you can ask questions during that time. So, there are supports that exist. Asking your TAs, your professors, and academic counselors are really great resources just to know what's out there.
And it's interesting because all these resources are there. Sometimes they feel hidden or
Very.
inaccessible, but I find that just going and asking the question to your professor, your TA, was
Yeah,
a lifesaver for me when I was
100%.
in university because I didn't have an older sibling that had sort of went through and sort of figured it out and said, "Oh, here's the tips that you need." I had to figure it out myself, and having the ability to have reliable people to answer questions and guide was really instrumental for that.
Exactly.
I think one of the other things that, and this goes into the next question that I wanted to pose to you, are some programs and schools better than others? And I know that you're a medical resident, so I put this question more into that vein. But maybe you can think more broadly about people who want to pursue a career into the health professions, pharmacy, nursing, rehab, medicine, things like that. Like, how do you make your decisions, like on your programs and things like that? Or are there factors that you took into account to help you make your decision for where you went for your undergrad?
That's a really good question. And I know it's something that, a lot of high schoolers will be asking, whether, they're interested in medicine, in pharmacy, or really any program, actually.
Hmm.
I think there's a few things to take into consideration, but even before going into those, I'll preface with the fact that almost any university will provide the foundation that you need to then apply to medical school. At the end of the day, medical school is medical school application is quite rigorous in the sense that, you're outlining all the extracurriculars, research, volunteer, and employment that you've done, but there is also an interview component to it.
Hmm.
So it's not solely based on, which institution you went to, but on many different factors. When it comes to the program, I think it's important to think about the factors that lead to your own success. For me, speaking very personally, it was staying at home. So for me, having those supports, my family, my friends, and
Right.
knowing that I could fully focus on school is really what helped me kind of flourish in the university or the academic environment. You'll hear schools such as, McMaster, where a lot of students will go as pre-meds, because it does kind of help you get into medical school. But it's more the sense that the programs or the classes are conducive to applying to medical school, in the sense that University of Ottawa and University of Toronto or other schools may have classes that are a little more difficult, or the program requirements or the classes that are required are a little more structured. So in other schools, you might have more electives, and so if you're more interested in a class, I would assume you might do better in that class. Um,
Mm.
so you will hear anecdotally, or you'll hear from people that one school is better than another. I will say from experience, every cohort that I see is a pretty good mix of so many different universities from across Canada. So it's important to keep in mind the personal factors that lead to your success as well. Whereas like the institution itself, I don't think will change very much. When it comes to the programs, I would say the exact same thing here. For University of Ottawa specifically, you'll hear the whole debate of biomed versus health sciences.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
again, it really comes down to your own strengths. So me, I'm not someone who does well with essays or, long writing assignments. So I knew that health sciences, which has a little more of social science, wasn't really up my alley or my strong suit. I was much more someone who, the biology, the chemistry, the physics, the calculus,
Yeah.
sitting down, memorizing formulas or like the objective parts of science. Not only was I interested in it, so I was okay with spending much more time, but I also found it was something that came easier to me. And I also want you guys to keep in mind, applying for a program, going into a program isn't a one and done thing. You always have room to either change or grow. And, there's the whole idea of I'm going to university, I need to finish it at a specific amount of time. And I think that kind of puts you in a box in the sense that you're very stressed and you make a choice and it's hard to change. I think it's always important to keep in mind, always have that self-reflection. What do I want out of this program? Where do I see myself? What's the biggest or most beneficial impact that I can make? And where do I need to be to do that? So, I actually started in biochem, but I finished with a general bachelor's in science. When I later realized that organic chemistry wasn't my main interest, I broadened my degree to have more, to have different sciences rather than kind of honing in on chemistry specifically. So, ensuring that's the pager there. I'll answer it. I'll answer it in a bit. Um, and so that's why it's really important to always have that self-reflection moment.
Yeah.
And as Dr. Maniat was saying, recognizing what exists out there. So, guidance counselors, academic counselors are key for these things to kind of figuring out what programs exist. And so on. And I see that there's a second question. How did you choose your undergraduate program? And I think I answered that a little
Yeah.
earlier with the engineering interest, but I ultimately chose biochem.
It's interesting because as you went through your kind of conversation, I was reflecting back on, okay, where did I go and why did I choose that sort of pathway? And I went to the University of Winnipeg because I'm originally from Winnipeg, and I chose that university over the University of Manitoba because I liked the smaller class sizes. So the biggest class that I had was 100 people because that was the biggest room at the university.
Wow.
When the room is
Yeah,
the rate limiting piece, it gives you a very different dynamic. And as a result, we felt like we were part of almost like a high school group moving our way through. But it was a university that allowed me to actually do Canadian history, do some political science, do some philosophy courses, in addition to my biochemistry and organic chemistry stuff, because I was interested in those spaces. So I think, having a couple of things in mind from what you were saying, not sort of carving it in stone, being flexible, taking data in and absorbing and adjusting. And this is where those mentors really help you, is important. But then giving yourself the ability to succeed, and by knowing those personal things that you need.
exactly.
And everybody's a little different. Some people want to fly the coop and head out somewhere, and they're okay with that.
Yep,
Others say, you know what, this is going to be a bit of a transition and shift. I'd like to know that there are certain pieces of my life that are nice and stable,
exactly.
take care of, and so that's helpful to have in the back. So maybe we'll have one more question, and then we'll see if there are any questions in the audience, and our moderator, Heather's going to help us out with that. But the question of extracurriculars, how do I get involved? How much is too much, maybe? How do I get a balance with these things, especially when there's coursework? Some people work, like I work through university as well. So how do you balance all these competing sort of interests? And time is a limited resource, as it were.
Unfortunately, that is the reality. And, you'll see a lot of the times, your classmates or your colleagues involved in so many different things, and it can get a little stressful on your end thinking, how can I get involved, or how are they able to juggle all of these things? And I might sound like a broken record at this point, but again, the self-reflection and introspection is really important here. When it comes to extracurriculars, I think the most important thing is to pursue things you're passionate about. And the reason why that's important is because it no longer feels like a chore or something you have to do. It's something you're genuinely interested in. You're going to carve out time specifically to dedicate to these extracurriculars. For myself, for instance, actually started in high school where we have to complete the 40 hours of community service. I worked in Gloucester Association for Children with Special Needs. So this was just a Saturday 3-hour program every week. So I was quickly able to complete my 40 hours, but I continued this program into undergrad. I continued into medical school, and now I come in every now and then during residency when I'm not on call on weekends. But all to say, this is something that I was interested in. I very much enjoyed. So my Saturday mornings, it didn't feel like an extracurricular that I had to do or a chore. And I think that's why it didn't feel like a huge burden. You know, if there's also interests you have research-wise, initially I was under the impression that, synthetic chemistry or organic chemistry was my interest. I did enjoy it, but I just didn't see myself in it career-wise. So the first step is to look for opportunities that you're interested in. And in terms of finding these opportunities, most universities will have websites of all the clubs that exist. Ottawa, for example, you can search up the University of Ottawa clubs, and on a website, it shows everything that exists, as well as their contact information. So these are clubs, you can get involved in. You can message them, email them, and from my understanding, clubs are always more than happy to have volunteers join. And just going back to my Gloucester Association for Children with Special Needs example there, I started off as a volunteer, but now I'm actually a cover staff. So,
Nice.
When the staff
Nice.
aren't able to come in, I get called in. And, joining groups from a beginning, like a club, you will likely see this natural increase in the responsibilities that are given to you, your own interest, and you might even end up being, president or head of the club because you joined something you were so passionate about. And I know this is all coming back to the idea of applying, to whether it be medical school, pharmacy, or any other programs that you might be interested in. It's the quality of these extracurriculars that are usually sought after rather than the quantity. You could have a dozen different involvements, short-lived, but your CV or your resume is quite filled. But then you'll have maybe 3 or 4 in another scenario, but you were in them for a very long time. Individuals also notice, you progressed in terms of your responsibilities to a point where maybe you were even leading it in the end. But I think those are the 2 most important things, find something that you're passionate about, and then keep in mind that the quality is usually more important over the quantity. And then when it comes to, balancing it with your course load, thinking back to when I was in university, I will admit I did take on more than I could handle. But then again, coming back to the idea of mentors or people you look up to, I think at some point they were probably tired or sick of me, but they never expressed that ever. And I'm half kidding when I say that, but they were incredible in terms of seeking out the advice of classes are getting a little hard. I have all of these involvements and I just don't know what to do. It's completely normal to feel, at a crossroads with what should I do? What should I prioritize? But, reaching out to those mentors is what was key for me.
And that actually really resonates with me, Sada, because when I was in those situations as well, um, I always put myself in the sort of the shoes of, okay, what am I actually learning? Sure, this is an extracurricular, it's not I'm not sitting in a classroom doing it, a test or doing studying, but what am I learning out of this? And I think that's another lens to take into life, right? Like if you have to work, and I had to work my way through university. What did I learn? I learned a lot about communications, listening to what the customer wants, because the customer is always right, apparently, right? And how to sort of time manage. And it was interesting because I could convey those into my conversations about why do I feel that I'm ready to come into this professional program or that program.
Exactly.
So it wasn't just my coursework that prepared me or the projects that I had done, but I also had this other learning experience that I actually did learn from because I proactively said, what do I have to learn here about myself,
Exactly.
about how I do things? So I think it's helpful to not just say, okay, this is just add-on stuff, but be intentional. Pick,
Uh-huh.
be choosy, but thinking about, I like the what you said, quality over the quantity piece is really the big lesson there. Well, Heather, maybe we'll look to you and see if there are any questions in the chat or in the Q&A that maybe Sada and myself could, answer.
There's some very specific questions, and there are some very general questions that you may have answered in some way or another, but I will pose them again if we have time,
Okay.
because it's always good to have a little refresher or a summarization of what we've learned. So I'm going to start off with Miriam because it's a good question. You've already segued into this in your last little conversation. Miriam asks, how can I find health or hospital volunteer opportunities as a grade 10 student? And can you provide us information about volunteering?
It's a really good question.
Yeah.
Is it okay if I take that, Dr. Maria?
Go for it.
Okay,
Go
sounds
for it.
good.
Yep.
So I remember, so I actually did my 9th grade in Djibouti, so Eastern Africa. So when I came back in grade 10, that's when I knew about the 40 hours that I needed to complete. And I vividly remember just searching up on Google, volunteering in Orleans, which is the part of Ottawa that I live in.
Mm,
And that's actually how I found the Gloucester Association for Children with Special Needs. As for the hospital, I also used to volunteer at CHIO. And really just on the CHIO website, if you look for volunteer opportunities, there's an application form, and they do take volunteers, on a rolling basis throughout the year. I specifically used to volunteer during the summer in high school,
mhm.
so just when I wasn't in classes. And then same thing with the Ottawa General Hospital. I've seen a few, mentees that are in high school that I see volunteering around. And if you speak in French, a great opportunity is volunteering at Montfort as well. So when you go on the hospital websites, there's always a little volunteer tab, and you can click that drop down menu and there's an application for it.
And another strategy, and this goes to another question that I saw in the chat from ZH, would co-op help? And that's another strategy. Some high schools have co-op programs that are connected with hospitals. So for example, there are 2 high schools that we partner with for a co-op program in the Equity and Health Systems Lab here in Ottawa, Gloucester High School and Sir Robert Borden. And we have students that are with us actually for a full semester, half a day, half day afternoons with us, and then one of those afternoons they're at the Ottawa Hospital, circulating in and amongst the other co-op opportunities, so they get some other exposures. But it goes back to the quality of the experience. I find one could be a volunteer in a gift shop, and that might be helpful. But I think your time is limited. You want to make good choices that help you learn something. Push and ask for opportunities where you can actually learn what it's like to be in the hospital, not just be at the hospital. There's a difference, right? And so you have to push yourself a little bit. But some high schools have co-op programs. If they don't have anything set up, maybe that's a conversation we could have.
Thank you. There are 2 questions I see side by side here about biochemistry. So I'm going to read them both to you, and maybe you could speak to them. This is probably a question for Sada. So do you have any suggestions for study habits or things I should do to prepare for applying for university, specifically in biochem? This person, Tanushka, is in grade 10. And then the next question from somebody else is, what do you think are the biggest advantages of studying biochem as an undergraduate?
That's a really good question. So for the first one, making sure you take your 3 sciences in high school, biology, chemistry, and physics. They provide a really great foundation, and when you do them in universities, the beginning lectures are almost like a review. So you're almost going into the class already knowing a few things, and working, on your study habits. So for me, it was really important to find where I was most productive, which for me was always at home in my room. Some people are more productive at the university library, some people are more productive in coffee shops, in their Ottawa public libraries. So just finding the place where, where you're able to get into your zone for studying, because there's going to be a lot of studying in university. But yeah, so taking those classes in high school and then the study location was really important. As for
me, I would just add on that it was great to have a group to study, because I found that it was so hard to memorize all those pathways. And so you're just trying to get it done because you need to get it done for the course. And so working together, working smarter, not harder, was sort of the adage that I sort of had as I was going through that. Work together.
That's very true. And then, so for the benefits of biochemistry as an undergrad, for me, since I was interested in organic chemistry and chemistry in general, I think that's kind of why I leaned towards it. So biochem is one of those classes where you take all 3 organic chemistry courses. It's a little more technical in the sense compared to like biomedical sciences, where you might only take Orgo 1 and 2. And then I feel like, if being a professor, if working like in the synthetic chemistry field, which is what I initially thought, it is also quite great. But also if you're applying just to, medicine or pharmacy or other programs like that, I think it's also a very interesting program. But the good thing to do whenever you're applying to any program is to go to the university website and see what courses are given every single year, as well as which electives. I got the chance to take Greek mythology and Roman civilization 1 and 2 because I had electives that were open to me when I switched from biochem to biomed, which was very interesting actually, and a bit of a breath of fresh air with all the other classes I'm taking. So it's important to know what classes are given for each program and if those align with your interests as well and what you're thinking of pursuing. And the guidance counselors can really help you with that as well.
So maybe, Heather, I'll just go through, because I know we've only got a few minutes.
Oh.
I'm going to do some rapid fire answering of questions that are in the Q&A. If that's okay?
Yes.
And I'm not going to, I'm just looking for the ones that went to, very specific questions. So what do you need to get into medical school? Well, each medical school is different. So you're going to have to do some homework. Google the website, see what the requirements are. And then based on that, you will either not be eligible based on what your interests are, or maybe you didn't take those courses to apply to certain schools. The same thing goes for MCAT. Not all schools require an MCAT. When I did, I had to have an MCAT, so I had to take it. In terms of extracurriculars in high school, I think it goes back to being strategic, thinking, what am I actually going to get out of this? What am I doing this for? Don't do it just because your parents ask you to do it or because your friend is doing it. Make sure it directly links to a passion, and it becomes something that could actually perpetuate. I started off doing stuff with the Canadian Red Cross in the first aid CPR department and the water safety, and that translated into further work in that space, employment, and became a first aid CPR instructor. And then eventually into medical school. And so you just never know where those volunteer things eventually migrate into. In terms of the co-op question, there was a question, I don't really get what a co-op is. A co-op is a term within a school structured curriculum in which there's dedicated time for you to go and get experience, practical experience within a specific domain. And oftentimes those co-op placements are in different settings and different industries. But within the health sector, there can be very specific co-op programs that can be designed within hospitals or within labs. In terms of balancing workload and personal life, that's a really good question. It's a tough one. For me, keeping track of things, and before I had a phone, I literally had a paper agenda book that kept me on track with little flags. Okay, when are things due, and what do I need to get done by certain dates? Because there was so much happening, both personally as well as my academic stuff that I was trying to do. And I found that was the most helpful strategy. Now there's apps for this, and there's planner or applications as well that you can learn to do this. courses, we talked about that. What should I major in university to get into medical school? It depends. In a lot of universities, depending, as long as you've got your prerequisites to go into medical school, there are multiple majors that a person could do. I had colleagues of mine that did music or English or history or law, and then they went into medical school. So it becomes a bit of what fits with who you are and what your interests are. If you want to think about health administration, there's a lot of opportunities as well that I think you can explore at universities or through once again through the hospital as well. I think we're at time.
We are at time, so I hate to stop this wonderful conversation, but it is time to say goodbye. I thank you. Do we call you Dr. Hussein?
You can,
Yes,
yes.
we
She
thank you,
is.
Dr. Hussein, and we thank you, Dr. Maniat. It was lovely to hear both of your perspectives.
Thank you.
And to all of you who are listening, good luck with all of your explorations. And we have experienced some really great conversation here, and I hope you take that with you in your future. Bye,
Awesome. Thanks
everyone.
very much, everyone. All the best.
Bye now.
Thank you. That was really great.
Great. Thank you. Thanks
And
very much, Heather.
enjoy the rest of your day.
Likewise. Have a good
Okay.
one.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.